Now, sometimes a controversial topic, or probably the one that gets the average person to get up in arms, is where does the money go from an MA membership when they pay for a licence?
Look, a majority of the money goes in insurance now.
Yep.
So everyone's aware, and it's not a secret. Public liabilities being terrible. The insurance markets are really hard right now. So the cost to insure the sport right now annually with your public liability, personal accident, you've got to have associations liability or directors and officers to protect the clubs and the boards. You're looking at just over $3.6 million now annually. Then you've got to throw in your cyber insurance, your officers insurance, start throwing all that in, and that's the substantial cost. So the largest single cost of the sport.
The 3.6, that's your insurance premium. Yep. And then you've got all the structure. So how many staff, officers?
Yeah, you've got to fund the staff.
Just operating costs in general.
Operating costs. States work off their own. We are independent companies. So MA and the 7 states are all independent companies, separate businesses, trying to operate as together, but they are separate businesses. They've got to generate their own revenue. And they generate revenue by selling permits, etc., and events to clubs.
Yep.
That's where they make their money.
And MA handles all the insurance? Is that
all the insurance
correct?
is centrally. Yep.
So there was a press release that went out late 2023, and it looked pretty dire from when I read it. Yep. I've got a little bit of a clip here out of it, and I'll read it just for those that haven't. I'll take the last bit out of it here. MA's risk profile was becoming too high for our insurer to be prepared to renew our cover. The impact of a non-renewal of our insurance cover would have meant that all MA permitted motorcycling activity in Australia would have to cease on October 31, 2023. How serious was that?
Pretty serious. Look, we were unable to get renewal terms at one stage. Look, it's not, behind the scenes there's always problems with insurance due to your risk. Right? So you start seeing incidents that occur, not just here, also globally. But you've seen spectators getting killed at Fink. That was very public. Targa, Tasmania. We had a few ourselves, not spectators, thankfully. While no fatality is, nothing good comes out of fatality for anybody. In this day and age, you hurt spectators, you are treading a fine line. And motorsport's treading a fine line when it comes to hurting spectators. There's an expectation, and you as a former rider will also know this, there's an expectation that motorcycle racing is dangerous. And you're going to go out there and look at areas like Supercross and road racing. Supercross, highly specialised, you make a mistake, it's going to hurt. Road racing, they're doing 350 kilometres an hour. You're not going to get off lightly when you hit the ground. So you'll start looking at your risk profile, but riders generally accept that they're going to be hurt at some stage during their career, and they generally know that they've got to get over it and get on with it.
Yes,
spectators don't expect to get hurt. They expect to be able to turn up and not, have their children or their wife or them sitting there and have a motocross bike land on top of their car while they're sitting around the motocross track.
Yeah.
And these are the sort of areas where Australia has probably fallen behind a little bit to the rest of the world. On the other side of it, I would think where, from the point of view of where the law sits, we are possibly the most litigious country in the world now. And that's actually a bigger issue. And that's one of the things that affects our insurance renewal. So what we had to do was introduce what we call a gross negligence clause.
Yep.
Our policy has never had a gross negligence clause. So you can be as negligent as you like. And in the end, the insurance company pays. Now it's got a gross negligence clause, which means if you are grossly negligent, then it's no different to when you drive your car home, and if you've had a few too many and you crash your car and you're found to be over 0.05, your insurance company doesn't pay.
So, and grossly negligent would be in terms of a spectator getting hurt, mostly.
No,
for an event,
not necessarily. Look, accidents always happen, but gross negligence would be known risk, and somebody gets injured.
Yeah, gotcha.
So you've ignored it, and it's like the guy standing in the middle of the freeway here, and we watch him for an hour as he wanders back and forth across the road. The reality is, when you're in a controlled environment like a racetrack and you see that happening, you've got to do something about it.
Yeah.
Right? And if you don't, and he gets hit, or you allow him to stand there and he gets taken out, well, you break the rules and it hurts somebody. That's not good for the sport. It's not going to be good for those people.
You mentioned Australia's like the most litigious country. Why is that?
I think it's because our laws allow the ambulance chasers to go after people, and when a family has somebody who gets injured, or even a rider, you're sitting at home there and someone says, listen, Cale, you broke your leg there because that official, that other rider took you out. He shouldn't have done that. He broke the rules. I'm going to get you money. And he tells you he's going to get you $2 million. And you sit there and go, some people sit there and go, wow. And it doesn't cost me anything until we get to the other end. And you get to the other end and they settle the claim for 100 grand and they take 150. And all it does is damage the sport.
So are these those no win, no fee ads you see on the TV?
That's them.
Gotcha.
Yep. And they are rife in Australia.
And are they not permitted elsewhere, or is it just easy market?
Easy market. I think the other thing is that in other countries you can sign your rights away. In Australia you can't.
Is that like a black event type?
Well, no, you can sign. You sign a
At your own
waiver.
risk.
You sign a waiver, and you go to riders briefing. You enter events where you tell everybody you're not going to sue.
Yeah.
Yet we still get sued 6 to 9 times a year.
So explain that process. I've always wondered that. Like, why can't you just do things at your own risk? Why is it?
Well, you can.
Why do you have to be liable to
your family or your partner or don't sign the waiver?
Yeah, gotcha. And that's where the lawyers come in, and
that's where the lawyers come in.
Times get tough.
And times are tough, and we'll attack whoever's got money.
Yeah.
But of course they take most of it. So that's that a lot of people are unaware that we get 6 to 9 public liability actions launched against us every year.
And are they usually initiated by like the family of the injured rider, or a lawyer?
I think the lawyers initiate.
They've convinced them to do it.
They've convinced them to do it.
That's quite sad. It's like greedy profiteering.
The names for a reason. I mean, they read items in the press and they make contact.
And that's
sometimes
their business
they're
model.
the initiator.
Wow.
Yeah.
What can you do about that?
Nothing.
No.
In other countries, Europe and America, we'll use those for example. We discuss with our counterparts in other countries. You can run a MotoGP race in Europe with 100,000 people there on about a €1 million public liability policy. In America, you can run MotoGP on a $5 to $10 million public liability policy. Here, you can't run anything for under 20 million.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous.
Can you just have general public liability, or it's got to be specific through?
The problem is now that most general public liability policies have an exclusion for motorcycles and motorsport.
They do. Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's the problem. It's like travel insurance.
It's kind of sad because I'm just saying, like, the riskier everything is, the more they're just going to push it away and say we don't cover it.
Well, what they do is, in the end, when you look at insurance markets, there's probably only 6 to 8 insurers worldwide, and they're doing like Motorsport Australia with car racing, or some events in the US, or us here in Motorcycling Australia. We might have 6 insurers on our insurance program. What that means is that when we put it out there into the marketplace, they come along and say, yeah, they've got a pretty good risk profile. We might take 20% of that ticket, and someone else might take 60%. So it's not made up of just one insurer. And in the end, those insurers are on multiple different markets. So they could be insuring us, Motorsport Australia, Moto America, FIM, England. They could be insuring other sports. In the end, there's only 6 to 8 globally that are really involved.
And they all compete with each other, I'm assuming?
They all compete with each other, and what happens is that they decide that area of their business, they look at the returns versus the outgoings and say, this year we're going to drop the bottom 10% of our riskiest areas. And if we happen to fall in that,
as we nearly did by the sounds of it.
As we nearly did.
So back to that press release, like how close was that, and in the future, is that a risk or?
Look, to give you how close the timelines were, we probably were aware and confident that our ticket was going to be filled probably in the first week of October. We didn't get renewal terms, actual terms on our desk until 48 hours before the end of the month. Now, look, that's not completely out of whack for the insurance market.
Okay.
I spoke to one other motorsport organisation in Australia, and they got who do their renewal on the 31st of December, 1st of January, and they got their terms at lunchtime on December 31.
And just to put in perspective, what's on the limbo, like if that didn't come through, what?
That January 1, everything was off.
And same for MA, if that?
Yep. November 1, everything could have been off.
And then what?
And then...
Hypothetically,
look, clubs and people wouldn't operate because all of a sudden when there's no insurance, that means they become personally liable. Which means if you run an event, say I'm going to run it anyway, well, the directors of that club or that state or you personally, if you ran the event, then all your assets will be on the line if and when it went wrong.
Is it a lot of that the landowner as well?
Yep.
They're liable probably the most?
Yeah. Our permits that are issued for an event protect the landowner. Landowner gives permission to the club. Club gets the permit with public liability, which covers the landowner.
Gotcha. So to summarise all this for people watching, majority of what you do is insurance, majority of licence fees is insurance. Majority of rules that come through are insurance. It's not...
So much around insurance right now and the risk. So where we've got to all go is to try and... The sport's never going to be completely safe. We know that. But there's certain areas we can do where we can put in processes that protect people.
Yep.
And right now, the focus on that is to ensure, we're never going to be insured completely, but try to ensure that we, when people turn up to watch you guys ride, that they can come there and not expect to go home maimed by a motorcycle.
Yeah, gotcha. So to put it in like real layman's terms again, there was a price increase, I think this past year or the year before. Was that purely insurance premium going up?
Yep.
Yeah.
Purely insurance costs.
So everyone in the comments saying, MA, it's...
Look, people say if you talk to the people who have been on the receiving end of insurance, and we got one the other day, did a seminar in New South Wales, and a guy wrote us an email and said he was on the receiving end of the MA insurance that protected him in a liability case about 10 years ago that went for 5-6 years, the case. And he said, it was such a, he felt he was so well protected, didn't cost him a cent. They attempted to sue him.
Yeah.
He was an official. And he said without it, he probably wouldn't have been within the sport anymore. So we pay out around, our personal accident policy runs somewhere upwards of around $1.2 million a year.
That's a payout.
That's personal accident. So that's for people who get permanent injuries, fatalities, serious injuries.
Yeah.
That's attached to your licence. It varies between 1.1 and 1.2 million dollars a year.
And that's consistent.
That's the premium. Yep. And we set that because that's our insurance, and it pays out 1.1 to 1.3 million dollars a year.
Yep. Sorry, the payout I meant, is that consistent?
Pretty consistent. And
you
the
can
premium gets reflected. If we have a bad year, and this year didn't start out great, but if we have a bad year and you have 1 or 2 fatalities and a couple of serious injuries, neck, back, spinal, it's pretty easy to throw away $500,000 in 4 or 5 races.